Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video, and if you haven't been living under a rock inside the NBA world, then you would know that ESPN has come out with its top 100 players list. So, understandably, it's got a lot of people riled up, like every single year. People forget about it after, a few months, but it does get people riled up, and obviously for good reason. You have guys like Klay Thompson at 49th this year. And it happens every single season. A couple years ago when Carmelo Anthony was actually good and Lonzo Ball was a rookie, they placed him over Carmelo Anthony. So that was obvious. That got a lot of people heated. And for good reason, because, Carmelo Anthony was the better player. And although he didn't have a good season with the Oklahoma City Thunder, he was still a better player from that past season. So there is a good reason as to why, Klay Thompson and other guys are rated low and some guys are rated high, but there is also another reason why, lists in general are like this, and it's not just ESPN that does this. It's Sports Illustrated, it's Bleacher Report, it's everyone, and the reason is it's really business. So if you think about it, if you make a good list, if you make a perfect list that everyone is gonna agree with, and that's not even possible, like inside with all the media nowadays, especially with the NBA, like everyone's gonna get riled up about something. Not everyone can agree on one thing. However, if you make a good list that most people can agree on, people are gonna send it to their friends if they haven't already seen it, and it's gonna be forgotten about pretty quickly because there's not really much to talk about. ESPN did a good job in the list. However, if ESPN even puts one or two players, low, for example, this time Klay Thompson at number 49, people are gonna get riled up. It's bad publicity is still publicity. So, it's gonna get comments, it's gonna get likes. Well, it's gonna get dislikes, but the comments are gonna get likes, and it's really just gonna, push the post even further, even if it's bad. So that's essentially why, and it's not even the NBA, that's with everything. It's really a business. What are they gonna choose? Money or a good list? They're gonna choose money. And I mean, to most people, who wouldn't? So I'm gonna go down the list and not necessarily pick out every single player, because there are some players that are in a good position, and I'm not gonna make my own list because I just don't feel like taking that much time. But so at number 1 we have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who I think rightfully deserves that. And honestly, the top 10 is pretty good. Like, I can agree with the top 10. Obviously there is some guys I'd change around, but my main point of emphasis here is to kind of pick out the really bad rankings. So the first bad one we kind of have is CJ McCollum at number 13. Now, he's been a good player. He's been an underrated player throughout his past seasons, and sadly he's been overshadowed by Damian Lillard. But he's not a top 15 player inside the league. He never has been. There are so many better players in this list, like Rudy Gobert, Klay Thompson, Ben Simmons, Karl-Anthony Towns. There's so many guys, and I'm going to list every single player that not necessarily I think is better, but I think is comparable to that player. So another thing about CJ McCollum is his advanced numbers they're okay, and he's not a spectacular defender. So I just feel like he's a good player and he's underrated in most people's opinions. But number 13, he's not that good of a player, and they're saying here that he is the second best shooting guard inside the league, and that I think everyone can disagree with. So at 14 we have Rudy Gobert. I feel like that's fine with Rudy Gobert. He's finally getting some respect. At number 15, Ben Simmons. Okay, so Ben Simmons gets a lot of hate because he doesn't have a jumper, but he does everything else pretty well. He's a good playmaker. Obviously, he's a good rebounder. He's a good defender. He's good at most things. He played okay inside the playoffs too, not outstanding obviously, because shooting does play a big factor inside the playoffs. However, he isn't a top 15 player. There are so many players that are better than him on this list. But yeah, number 16 is Luka Don Chooch, another player that should definitely be much lower. I mean, he shot 42.7% from the field, which that's not a top 20 player if you're shooting 42.7% from the field, unless you're putting up, standing defensive stats or something like that. And, he didn't have that much of an impact this year, as most people say. His offensive rating is the same the team's offensive rating was the same when he was on and off the courts. It's not something that, a superstar would do. Usually a superstar, which is, a player that's ranked 16th, I guess a high all-star, they would have a high impact. He's not great defensively. And there's just so many players that are better than him on this list. And people call me a Luka Don Chooch hater, but especially because of that one video that I made that absolutely got, bamboozled by, Luka Don Chooch dick riders. And, I did spell his name wrong, or pronounce his name wrong, but you know what? Whatever. I'm not a hater. I'm not a Luka hater. He's one of my favorite players inside the draft, so just to get that out of the way, let's move on. The next bad one, I think, is Donovan Mitchell. He's not that good. 20th. I do think he is better than Luka Don Chooch at this point. I think Luka could pass him next year, but in any case, I do think Donovan Mitchell is overrated here. I have nothing bad to say for him. I have his shoes, but he's not that good of a player. There are players rated or lower than him that are a better player than him. At number 21 is Jimmy Butler. He's the first player that I think should be rated higher. He didn't have that good of a season, I guess, statistically, especially with the Philadelphia 76ers, but he really turned it up in the playoffs, and he's so much better defensively than a lot of these other guys, and his offensive game is more polished. And also, I think he is going to play better next year statistically on the Heat, just because he's going to be the main guy. And I feel like he's going to have a lot of really capable role players around him on the Heat. Next, we have Pascal Siakam at number 22. Although I'm Canadian, so, I shouldn't be saying any shit about him. I think he's a really good player. His advanced numbers are spectacular, for those of you who don't know. But, Blake Griffin, who's rated one lower here at number 23, is, in my opinion, still a better player. And there could be other debates for other players too. So I just don't think he's the 22nd best player inside the league. At number 25 is De'Aaron Fox. Another player I think should go down. He's really just not a top 25 player inside the league. He's a great passer. He's a great defender. I don't think he's underrated or anything, but I really like him. But there's just a lot of players, Drew Holiday, Victor Oladipo, Draymond Green, even Andre Drummond, that I think are better players than De'Aaron Fox. The next player that I think should go down is Trae Young. I definitely don't think he should be at number 28. In fact, I thought debatably DeAndre Ayton had a better season than him, but I'll leave that for the comments. Tobias Harris at 29. This one's a real debate. I feel like there really isn't that many players that he would go above. However, I just feel like his impact on the Clippers was just, it's hard to pass up, and he didn't have time to kind of develop into the 76ers offense, especially inside the playoffs. Although he did play good, he rebounded really well, especially, when you're playing with Joel Embiid. However, I just think there's some players that he is better than, including Trae Young. Next up is Drew Holiday, who is the first really underrated player on this list. I feel like so many people, or so many of the more in-depth fans, know that Drew Holiday is an underrated player, and I thought ESPN would rate him higher, but of course they didn't. I know he played in a crappy team, and Anthony Davis was out a lot of the season, but he's such a good all-around player, and especially averaging over 7 assists per game, playing a lot of shooting guard. That's really impressive to me. So at number 33 is Victor Oladipo. He did have a season-ending injury, but the time that he was on, he was looking like debatably the second best shooting guard inside the league. I think 3/4 of the people would say. So putting him at number 33 is a little bit disrespectful. I feel like he won't take any steps back next season too. Number 35, a guy who's been hyped up since the moment he got into the league. I mean, he's only 21, right? But it's Jason Tatum. So overrated. I mean, 35. I mean, his teammate Al Horford is better than him, although he may not put up as good stats. Like, Jason Tatum's stats are, I wouldn't say empty at all, but they're just, he just didn't have a great season this year, and I just feel like he's not worthy of a top 35 player inside the league. Chris Middleton is alright. Al Horford is a player I think should go up, as I mentioned a second ago. Well, actually I didn't mention it, but Al Horford, a lot of his he doesn't put up great stats, but the stuff that he does really doesn't go onto the stat sheet, and even to the advanced stat sheet, he is a very high impact player. He's a good defender. He's never been a good rebounder for his career, and I feel like that's one of the main things that's held him back from, being a top 20-ish player inside the league, especially as a center. You need to be able to rebound, but I still do think he's underrated. He's a very good passer too. At number 38 is Draymond Green. Not a good season at all from him. He didn't make the All-Star game. That was partly the media's fault. However, I do feel like he is still underrated here. There are a lot of players that he is better than. He definitely turned it up inside the playoffs. That's a big emphasis. But yeah, one of the most underrated players in the league, and he has been for the past couple of years, I guess. At number 39, Kyle Lowry. I think he should go up. He had an underrated performance inside the entirety of the playoffs. Just because he didn't put up good numbers on the box sheet doesn't mean he didn't play good. I feel like he did play good. He did the little things that a lot of players didn't want to do. And I feel like the entire Toronto Raptors team was a team full of hustlers who really wanted to win. But he was a big part of that. And he's another one of those players that just does the little things that don't show up on the stat sheet. At number 40, Nikola Vucevic. He's a player that a lot of people think, puts up empty stats, and I could agree to a certain extent. He plays in the Orlando Magic. They're pretty trash. They have been essentially since Dwight Howard left. However, he turned it up last season, and whether or not that was since he was in a contract season doesn't really matter. But he had a really good season, and I feel like he should be going up. At number 41 is Lamarcus Aldridge. He's a veteran, and that's probably one of the reasons that he's so low. He had a really good season. He was, one of, if not the factor on why San Antonio played so good. They took Denver to 7 games. He played excellent all season. He's been very underrated the past 2 seasons. People keep thinking that he's gonna, decline, but he just hasn't declined. So at number 42 is the number 1 overall pick inside the draft, Zion Williamson. He is too high in my opinion, and that's the thing about rookies, is that I really can't say anything about them because they haven't played a game yet. So I'm going to say he should be lower. I don't think he's going to be the 42nd best player inside the league next season. That's just my opinion. He could totally prove me wrong. I like him. He's a good player, but I just don't think he's better than guys like Andre Drummond and Klay Thompson. At number 44 is Myles Turner, who I think should go up. A lot of players going up here, but he wasn't spectacular offensively, but he was spectacular defensively, and I feel like he was, a top 3-4 defensive center inside the league behind, Joel Embiid and Rudy Gobert. So I do think he should go up a few places, if not more. Next up is Demar Derozan. Although Aaron Gordon is good, who's at 45, DeMar DeRozan is still the better player, and he's better than Kevin Love. He's better than, Zion, who hasn't played a game. There's just other players that I feel like he is better than, even though he did have a down season. At number 48 is Bojan Bogdanovic. He's a good player. He shot well from the field. He's a really good shooter. He's a good all-around player and a really good role player, but, ahead of guys like Klay Thompson and Andre Drummond, it's just, I don't feel like he's that good of a player, at least not yet. At number 49 is Klay Thompson. Not much more to be said, the biggest snub on this list. At number 50 is Lorimar Cannon. Although I feel like he's a good player, I don't feel like he's a better player than, guys like Andre Drummond and even Eric Bledsoe. At number 51 is Jaylen Brown, another overrated Celtic. I do like him, so there's no bias against him, but he's not, a top 51 player inside the league. At number 52 is Andre Drummond. A lot of people hate on him because, because he can't shoot, and also because his team doesn't do well. But, he's led the league in rebounds 2-3 years in a row, so I feel like that should go into consideration. And he's not a bad defender. Like, he's a decent defender, and although Blake Griffin was the better player last season, it doesn't really matter. He's been a consistent player throughout his past 3 years inside the season, so I feel like he should be rated higher. At number 54 is Jaren Jackson Jr. He played really well last season, and it's kind of funny, he's playing inside the G League to start off this season, I believe. However, he's not the 54th best player inside the league. And at number 56 is Brandon Ingram, another player I think should go down. He's a good player, he's a good scorer especially, but aside from that, he really doesn't do too much. He's not a spectacular defender, and there's just players beneath him, especially veterans, that I feel like are better. At number 58 is Lou Williams, 3-time Sixth Man of the Year. I mean, what else can I say? He's a really good scorer. He's a big part in the Clippers' success in the regular season. Well, I mean, they didn't play great inside the regular season, but they defied a lot of odds, and he was a big part of that, and especially even taking the Warriors to 6 games. At number 60 is Karis Levert. He absolutely hooped in the first part of the season, but not to the extent of being a top 60 player inside the league. Yeah, he put up great stats, but I just feel like he was injured so early on that he could have gone down so much. So there's just other players, like DeAndre Eaton and Eric Bledsoe, that are just better than him. At number 64 is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I guess another underrated guy inside most people's eyes, but he wasn't better than Patrick Beverley to start off with. Like, Patrick Beverley, I would say, was the better player, even though Shai did put up debatably better stats. However, yeah, good to go along with that, he's not that good of a player. At number 65 is Gordon Hayward. I don't know if ESPN is still trying to get this guy to be better, because he's not going to be. I mean, he could be next season, but he did not have a good season last season, coming off of that gruesome leg injury. He's not going to be the same for the rest of his career for sure, but he's just not the same as he was before. At number 66 is DeAndre Eaton, who had an extremely underrated season. I think all Suns fans can agree that he needs to be fed the ball more. Not much else to be said. I think he's on par with Trae Young at least as of last season. So at number 67 is Eric Bledsoe, super underrated player. He was, debatably Milwaukee's second best player along with Chris Middleton. So I feel like that should be taken into consideration, and he made an all-defensive team, and whether or not he deserves that, it still shows that he is a good defender and he is a good all-around player. At number 68 is Lonzo Ball. So at first I thought about having him higher just because I was thinking about how much of an impact he really does have despite his stats. However, I realized how bad of a season he actually did have, and really his advanced stats weren't good at all. So I'm not going to say he's going to be any better than he's placed right there. Montrezl Harrell is another player that should go up. He was, right on par with Lou Williams for the Sixth Man of the Year, both on the same team. He had a breakout season last season, and he's another big part of the Clippers, I guess, quote-unquote success. Number 74 is Bogdan Bogdanovic, another Bogdanovic. I'm sorry, but you're not that good, man. You're a good player, and you're underrated in a lot of people's eyes, but you're not a top 75 player. I'm sorry. I wouldn't put you down very much, but not that far. I'm sorry. Steven Adams is next. I feel like he's a player that should go up. He's another player that does the little things. He may not even rebound well. He's one of those players that averages more offensive rebounds than defensive rebounds, partly because of Russell Westbrook. I'm sorry, man, but that's how it's got to be. But yeah, I feel like he's underrated. Most of the stuff he does doesn't show up on the stat sheet. Offensively, he contributes so much to his team, and I feel like that goes under the radar a lot. Patrick Beverley was another player I was debating about, but I feel like he's fine at 79 in general. At number 81 is Bam Adebayo. I'm not sure why he's this high, but there's not really much else to be said. He's just not that good of a player, especially considering Jusuf Nurkic is rated at 83. That seems kind of weird for me. He was injured at the end of the season, but he had an amazing season. Like, he was one of the biggest parts of, the Portland Trail Blazers' success. He was that third option. and he played great. Just basically after leaving the Nuggets, he started playing excellent. At 84 is Ricky Rubio, another player who is underrated. I guess that's why, I'm placing him up. I guess, have a bit of a soft spot for him. He's one of my favorite players inside the league, but just his playmaking goes so far under the radar, and he is like one of the best role players inside the league. At number 86 is Josh Richardson, who I feel like isn't that good. He had a good season, but even in 2K he's rated an 80, and I just don't feel like he deserves that. At 87 is Marcus Smart, who I feel like is a better player than Jaylen Brown. So I don't know why he's this low. He was getting good minutes at the end of the Celtics season for good reason. Really good defender, really good hustler. He may flop a bit, but you know what? He's an underrated player. At number 88 is Fred VanVleet. He had an amazing playoff run, but really his regular season wasn't that good. Like, he was just, a good bench player at most. So I feel like he should definitely go down. At 91 is Danilo Gallinari. Very underrated season last season. Not even just from this, just from everybody. He had a really good season for the Clippers. So the Clippers just, every single player who plays for them is just underrated. They're just a bunch of guys that, work hard and, put up good stats too. So he's another Clipper that went under the radar. He's going to play on OKC this year if he doesn't get traded, so he should hoop there for sure. But now at number 92, the most underrated player on this list, Julius Randle. The fact that he is rated beneath Joe Harris and Fred VanVleet is absolutely disgusting. Like, honestly, like Julius Randle, he was making a case to be an all-star last season. Well, I wouldn't say that far, but he was playing really good for the New Orleans Pelicans. And although they didn't win a ton, like, I sincerely believe he is, I'm not going to place him in a certain place, but he's much better than the 92nd best player in the league. And the final one is Robert Covington at number 97. He's a better small forward than Brandon Ingram, in my opinion. There's a reason he gets so many minutes. He was playing for the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are known to play the starters a lot. However, he's so good defensively, and he's just a really smart offensive player who I feel like does not get the recognition from anyone, especially ESPN. Alright, so now that I've gone over like the top 100 players and the ones that I feel like are most definitely wrong, there is a reason for them being wrong. So I mentioned earlier that it is a business, and they are going to place players in bad spots just so that they can make money and get people riled up. However, if you look at the website, which most people didn't, most people just went on Instagram and viewed people's opinions, shitty opinions, or I guess good opinions on ESPN's shitty list. However, most people didn't actually go to the website. So, what it says is for the 9th season in a row, ESPN.com is predicting the top players in basketball with NBA rank. The keyword there is predicting. So that's not necessarily the top 100 players from last season. That's just them predicting the top 100 players for next season. So although there is kind of good reason to get riled up, especially about Klay Thompson being as far back as 49, he's going to come back from injury at the end of the year. He may not even come back in the entire season. And that's why Kevin Durant isn't on the list at all. So that's what I was confused about at first, because I saw Kevin Durant wasn't even on the list. And then I figured, he's not playing next season. So how could this, so this must be for next season. So that's kind of my take on, lists in general and the NBA list especially. But if you liked it, leave a comment, subscribe, always helps. But thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.